just feel free if you want to put your cameras on. Love seeing everyone's smiles, but if everyone could just turn off their microphones, that'd be awesome.
So just a moment, Em. We are just getting ready to go on our Centercourt Club and Sports Facebook Live.
No worries. Hi, Isabella. Thanks for turning your camera on. I can see you smile. Love it. Maya, welcome. Thanks for being here. Hi Hung, how are you? Good. Oh my goodness, Marley Woods is in the house. Welcome, Marley Woods.
Okay. All right, Em, we are...
Go for launch.
We're about to go live on Centercourt Club and Sports.
Beautiful.
And yes, we are live on Centercourt Club and Sports. So, Emma, if we're ready to go, let me just... Okay. All right, have you got us, Em?
Yeah.
Okay, so welcome everyone to yet another episode of our Empower Hour with the one and only Emma Doyle. Emma, as everyone now well knows, is just an expert at turning your motivation into activation. We've had a fantastic few weeks thus far, and we're really excited to have you back, Em. For those who are not aware, Emma is a high-performance elite coach from Australia. She has a lot of experience all over the world working in, obviously tennis is her specialty, but in many different areas. And we're very excited, Emma, to have you back and ready to go again. So without further ado, over to you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Conrad. Absolutely brilliant to be back. And yeah, thanks everyone for your time. We're going to have a great session today with our patterns, looking at our habits and our rituals, our routines, and see if we can look at the ones that serve us and the ones that don't. So, you know, this is interactive. I'm loving it. The Brady Bunch style pictures of everybody. Thanks for keeping your microphones off, but feel free to open up your cameras so I can see everyone's smiles. So you know what I'm going to ask you to do straight away, into that chat box. So I'm a coach and I'm currently doing this webinar from Denver. And if you were here last week, I'd love you just to type in, if this is your first time doing one of my webinars, just put 1. If it's your second time, so this is the second week of the Empowerment Project, just put in week 2. So just as an example, I've popped it in the chat box there. I'm the coach, week 2, Ali, yay. Guru, Centercourt, marketing legend. We appreciate you, Jinwing, thank you. And Jin, are you a player, coach, parent? Throw in the chat box there so I know kind of what we've got, where have we got, and don't forget your sport as well. So if you're an athlete or a player, just pop in lacrosse. I think Lauren's our lacrosse girl there. And Atlanta, week 1, Marley, thank you for checking in. Parent, yes. Fantastic, Jingweng, thank you. Excellent. And I'm sure we've got a few more coming through the chat box as we go. So again, just great for me to see lacrosse, New Jersey, week 2. Thanks for coming back. And Isabella, welcome, week 1, tennis, fantastic, lacrosse. And we've got our coach on board. Thanks, Kim, appreciate it. Week 1, field hockey, love it. Week 2, thank you, Catherine. Brilliant. So looks like we've got, again, a good cross section. I know a lot of people have sort of watched week 1 offline. So again, you know, I know that people will be on and offline, but obviously you've got the benefit of being here and investing your time in terms of asking questions. Remember, anytime you want to ask a question, pop it in the chat box. Conrad gives me a wave and I'll stop what I'm doing immediately. That's the benefit of being here live and investing your time. So I just really appreciate that. As I cross over and we share my screen. So thumbs up, Conrad, if you can see my screen. We are cooking with gas, as they say in Australia. All right, so welcome back. So this is the Empowerment Project. Remember, this has been really designed off what athletes struggle with the most. So let me just click on the review of the Genius model. So last week, we started down here, remember, under this core module purpose, we started with your self-awareness. We're going to review the game plan in a minute. And so where are we heading today? We go up under the confidence core component, and we're looking at patterns. Patterns that serve you and ones potentially that don't serve you. So we're going to be taking a deeper dive into that. But where I did want to start was just when one of those glorious moments this morning when I was having my cup of tea, which I do in the mornings, and I got this note from Hanan in Kuwait, who, would you believe, has been, she came across Centercourt by chance, and she's found the courses really beneficial. I just love this here. She's 27 years old, and she basically said that joining a tennis club felt like a really far-fetched and a forgotten dream. And she said, as you can see here, it felt like picking up sport at this, it also felt that this is something that others get to do and that it didn't really work for her. So she's been doing the Empowerment Project, and she feels great to be able to reconnect with herself and to be able to build up her confidence. And I just love this. If you want it, then go after it. So thank you so much. It's amazing that Centercourt 360 is hitting Kuwait. So that just made my morning. And I thought that I just wanted to share that with everybody, to think that her heart deserves to be happy just by playing it and giving it a go rather than watching from the bleachers. So pretty cool little way to start my day. So again, just a lot of gratitude for everyone being out here. All right, so today we are looking at patterns. As I said, this is module 2 within the Genius model. So let's just review self-awareness. So the chat box, open it up. You had for 15 points. Who can remember? How did you get 15 points? What did you need to do from last week to get 15 points? Let's see if anyone remembers what that was and if anyone actually did it. So let's have a look. I'm going to open my chat box so I can see it and see if anyone has written in here about what you had to do. I'm going to give you another 5 seconds if I can see any answers. See if did anyone have a go at their gratitude statements? Yeah, beautiful. The breathing exercise was for 30 points. Fantastic. And Jim Ring, yes, the gratitude statements. So I'm just wondering if anyone actually had a go at that. Can we all just pop in the chat box what you're really grateful for right now? So I'm really grateful to Hanan for that message this morning. So just type in, let me know what you are grateful for right in this very moment. Really cool way just to start your day. A great pattern to get in the habit of. Grateful for the ability to be back on the tennis court. Couldn't agree more. And being out there with other people. I got back on the court first time this week. Grateful for friends, absolutely. And remember the 5 closest people you surround yourself with your friends. It's really a reflection of who you are. So always take a snapshot of who your friends are around you. Grateful for my ability to come back. Yeah. And also grateful for my friends. Mini vacation coming up. Nice. Fantastic. And for 40 points, I wonder if anyone had a go at auditing your life pillars. Just pop yes in the chat box if you had a sort of a non-judgmental snapshot with your little adult pillars, giving them a mark out of 10. Yes, thank you. Lauren, that beautiful. Excellent. Lots of yeses. All right, great. Remember, when you have a non-judgmental snapshot and self-awareness of exactly where you're at, then you can stretch your comfort zone and set yourself a stretch goal to be able to, move it up to a 10, or perhaps it was already a 10. But well done. So keep a note of how you actually win the game each week. So well done on that, everybody. That's really, really cool. So remember, as we start, as we always do, every webinar, section 1 is we begin with our unforced errors. Now, just as I'm talking through some of the most potential unforced errors people make with regards to their patterns, have a reflection of your own problems and challenges. The biggest one that I see with regards to patterns is that basically people don't set boundaries. And as a result of not setting boundaries, what happens is that they're less productive. So one of the classic examples, definitely is with regards to screen time and just getting caught up in the sort of the demands of social media, and all of a sudden you've lost 2 hours of your day. Another one with athletes that I see all the time, and especially on the road, and I don't know, Conrad, if you can relate to this as well, but when it comes to food choices, it's so much easier just to buy whatever's at the club, or whatever's at the whatever's sort of convenient to eat on the road, and or you're at an airport, and so you just buy something that doesn't necessarily fill you with full of great nutrition. And the other biggest problem I see is sleep, the sleep patterns, and people not trying to recreate the same pattern that they have at home, and so they make excuses, and then they end up sort of going down a bit of a spiral. So just reflect on what I'm going to get you again straight away in the chat box. Maybe you can relate to some of the patterns that you do that are not serving you. Just maybe have a quick reflect on if you want to share, or again, feel free to share them privately. If you ever share a message with me just privately, I won't mention your name. I'll just say what your challenge is out loud, but I certainly won't. Social media is a really tricky one. Thank you for sharing that. Social media, and staying up late and getting caught on that hamster wheel. Taking more time for yourself, absolutely, because you're busy servicing so many others, and discipline with sleep at night and getting distracted with so many tasks, and especially what you're thinking about or what you do just before you go to bed is absolutely critical as an athlete, as a parent, as a coach. So thank you everyone for sharing that. Really appreciate everyone being really honest with your unforced errors in the chat box there. So as we do each week, great habit to get into, especially in preparation for next week's module, which is empowering language, is to just go ahead and flip them. So for example, with regards to the promises, when you say yes to yourself, it's a bit like last week, you're putting your oxygen mask on first. When you establish boundaries, it's amazing how productive you can be when you take care of yourself. I get my time back. And then time seems to slow down when you have that morning routine, and you're a lot more present to what's going on, because everyone has the same number of hours in the day. So choosing when you open, as in open up your life to the outside world, is your choice. So that's always a good habit to get into. Just flipping your challenges into opportunities, flipping them from unforced errors into more empowering ways of thinking and ways of being. And obviously we'll go through the strategies and tactics on how to flip it, especially next week. We're doing a whole section on reframing your language next week, which I'm really excited about. So, and as I do, just to round off section 1, I want to share a couple of stories, if I may. So the first one is about Rafael Nadal. So yes, he certainly has a number of, if you've seen Rafa, just even watch, you don't have to have tennis background, you pretty much can see it on television, how methodical and prescriptive he is. But one thing you may not know is that he takes a freezing cold shower 45 minutes before every single match that he plays. And in the cold shower, he feels his power and resilience grow. That's his words. He says, I'm a different man when I emerge. I'm activated. I'm in the flow. Nothing else exists but the battle ahead. So what to me, that pattern, which is his routine, which forms a routine that he does every single time, creates a state change for him to get into a completely zoned moment to be able to embrace the battles of competition. And I love that, I just love that any sort of state change is a brilliant way to add to your playing toolkit, your athletic toolkit, your coaching toolkit, your parenting toolkit. And on that note, I'd love to also share a story from one of my clients. So I was working with an executive, sort of high flyer type corporate guy, was a CEO of a very large sort of financial company in Hong Kong. And he flew out to Melbourne. I sort of worked with him every day. And one of the first things we did, because I noticed after day one how tough he was on himself on the court, like constantly, like just such a perfectionist. And so when we identified his patterns of when he enjoys tennis and when he plays well, it was all linked to whether he read the financial review, as in literally whether he read the paper before he went out on the tennis court. And when he did that, everything just became like frustrated. He just got agitated. And when he didn't read the paper before he played tennis, he just was so much more free and so much enjoyed the moment. And then finally, one last story from a life coaching friend of mine who was flying back to Australia after Indian Wells, the tournament. She happened to sit next to somebody who'd lost in the last round of qualifications. And she's not a tennis coach, but she basically said to him, just got chit-chatting, and she said, why did you lose? And he said, it was windy. And then after it went on a little bit more time, she said, well, have you ever lost or won in the wind before? And he's like, yes. Like, why are you asking me these questions? And anyway, what it turned out is that basically his dad used to make him he always said, you have to make your bed before you play. Like before, in the morning, after you get up in the morning, you've got to make your bed. And so that morning on the last round of qualies, he said, that's ridiculous. I don't need to make my bed. I'm going to prove my dad wrong that you don't need to make your bed. And so the whole match, of course, it was, not necessarily consciously there, but something like that. And so finally, after, it's a long flight back from LA back to Melbourne, finally 8 hours into the flight, he's like, I lost because I didn't make my bed. So these patterns, can really be a total game changer, both in a positive way and obviously in a non-resourceful way. So perhaps I'm sure you've got your own ways of doing things, but today's really about what ones serve you and what doesn't. So that's really where we're heading. So that sort of rounds out section one. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to get into the 5 strategies. Remember, this is the what. So we've done your motivation for being here, but your potential unforced errors. Now we do the 5 strategies. And I'm probably going to test you at the end of today's webinar to see the first person in the chat box to remember one of these 5 strategies. All right. So the first strategy is what I call patterns, which of course is this module. Now, champions in the sporting world, of course, have a way of doing the boring and uncomfortable consistently over and over and over and over and over. You get it again, which creates a pattern. Okay. And you obviously need to begin by looking at your patterns. Now there's a reason why I call them patterns, because if you kind of see, I'll just share where I'm heading with this. Once you can identify a pattern, what you have then the opportunity is to create a new routine. So if you think old pattern, the next level is your new routine. And then the next level from that, once you do it over 21 days, becomes a habit. And then that new habit forms an embedded pattern. So you have, old patterns potentially that aren't serving you. And then once you go through that process from a pattern into then a routine that then forms a new habit, you find you'll have a new pattern, a new way of doing things that's part of just part of who you are. So they're sort of the steps, that ultimately will help you reproduce the best version of yourself time and time again. So that's the whole purpose of a pattern. And it can be boring. It can be uncomfortable. It can be a little bit like, I'm doing this again, but it's what's going to set you up for success. One thing I know in reading a lot of books about entrepreneurs and Fortune 500 CEOs, one thing that they always do on Sunday night is they always, take time on Sunday night, for example, to map out their week. That's one habit that is consistent that I hear them doing over and over and over again. So that's an example of a positive one. So that's strategy number one. Strategy number two is called triggers. So what I'm talking about here is generally we're looking at patterns that don't serve you very well. Okay, so what you'll find is there will be a trigger. And we'll go through some more examples of that a little bit later on. But that trigger it happens almost subconsciously. So it's outside of your awareness. And then the next thing you know, you're in the cycle. But being able to, once you realize it's a pattern that you want to change, once you can identify that trigger, then there's an opportunity to replace it. But you have to be able to identify it. And normally it'll be somewhere in that pattern. It'll be one of the steps. For example, and usually, remember, it'll be through your senses. So somebody might trigger you when they say to you, for example, time to get up. Just that sentence, time to get up, might trigger you to say, oh my God, I'm old enough to get myself out of bed, or that could really set you off in a non-resourceful way. It could be something you hear. It could be something you smell. It could be something you feel. It's just like a feeling that you get. Maybe it's when you're sleeping in a bed in a hotel, when you're on the road and the pillow's too high. It's anything that can trigger you to be able to have an unresourceful pattern. So that's a really important concept that you need to be aware of. So that's strategy number two. Strategy number three is that there will always be an order. There'll be an order to the pattern. You'll notice, especially, it could be a negative standpoint or it could be a positive standpoint. So one of the best examples is the alarm clock, which now no one really has an old-fashioned alarm clock anymore. Of course, what do we use? We use our phone. And if your phone is right next to your bed, you're either going to keep hitting snooze, okay, or as soon as you hit snooze, that little notification's popped up on your phone and you're off and running and you're already into your emails. And that's the first thing you're doing because the phone was right next to your bed. And there'll be an order to it. Even the way you drive to practice, there'll be an order to that, which, if you're stuck in traffic before you're about to practice, may really agitate you, may really frustrate you. So these are all things to be aware of because, and the order will generally be, again, remember the senses. So it'll be something maybe you hear, which creates something you think about, which creates a feeling into the order of your patterns that either serve you, remember, or they don't necessarily serve you. So that's strategy three. Strategy four is consistency. So embedding a new routine takes time, discipline, and patience. Obviously, new routines do not form overnight, and they do need to be repeated consistently. One of the biggest things, just in terms of motivation, remember, generally you're motivated towards pleasure or away from pain. Is the continuum, the motivation continuum. Obviously, if you can find ways to embed some sort of positive emotion towards wanting a new pattern, then that will be best case scenario. That'll then become part of your lifestyle. So just also on that note of consistency, what the data says is that we're really looking at doing something quite extreme for 3 days and a minimum then of 21 days. So you can choose something at the end of today, something you're going to do extreme for 3 days, or you can choose something you're going to do over 3 weeks. But that's a minimum. If you want to create a new habit, that's what you have to be able to do consistently for 21 days. So take last week's game plan of gratitudes. If anyone chose gratitudes, then doing gratitudes 3 times a week for 21 days gratitudes will just be part of who you are, and it will just be part of your journal. And generally speaking, as long as you're committed to the motivation towards, you think that that's good and you saw benefits, because all of a sudden your life was like, oh, wow, things are coming into my life and they're attracting to where I want to go and who I am. So that's the consistency. And then finally, and then I'll pause for any questions on these strategies, but just the 5th strategy and final strategy is what we call an anchor. So with anchoring, what we're talking about here is replacing the trigger with an anchor, because if you want to make a change, you have to become consciously aware of whatever your trigger is. And that will help you then create the new routine. So you have to be able to choose an anchor. So some examples of anchors might be just a little rubber band on your wrist. So it could be just be a flicking of your wrists. That could be an anchor. It could be a ring. It could be a necklace that you always wear. It could be an anchor. It could be your watch. It could be something on your phone, as long as it's not related to. It could be your screensaver on your phone that has some sort of quote on it, or to keep you reminded with regards to what the new pattern is that you want to create, and giving that an order. So I'll just pause for a breath there, and I would love if maybe, why don't we even just start in the chat box? Which of those 5 did you resonate with, or really made sense, or you're excited about experimenting with? Does anyone want to pop anything up in the chat box there? As Conrad, maybe I might jump over to you to see if there's any sort of comments or questions, reflections.
Yeah. Emma, look, I think as you're speaking, being an avid sports fan of many different sports, a lot of things start coming into my mind of different athletes, different sports, doing many things that obviously were not natural at the start and had then become a pattern. And so, you think about Leighton Hewitt and all of the different little figgles and nigs and things that he had. He used to famously watch and listen to Eye of the Tiger or Rocky Balboa before he walked out to play. Now that's, a little cliche, but that's how he played. And you see many athletes, a lot of Australian rules footballers where we're from, they do a lot of things. And it was interesting, you talked about the Rafa Nadal cold shower thing. A lot of footballers talk about doing the same thing. It's like for them putting on their coat of armor. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear if anyone else, everyone's still fairly young athletes, I would think, but if they have any sort of little patterns that they've developed. And then I think one of the keys is to identify, and maybe you need help with, what is helping you and what is distracting you. Because I've had many players that I've worked with and I've been lucky to travel around with that have a lot of little behaviors that are actually distracting them. And they often need someone else to observe that, to tell them. One classic one would be, and we see it all the time, cell phone at practice. So whether you're a tennis player or a lacrosse player, when you go to get a drink, the cell phone comes out. That is immediately, a distraction. It's pulling your attention away. So, yeah, very interesting stuff, Em.
Yeah, and we'll go into a little bit more, some practical ideas around the cell phone in the tactics. Is there any questions? Consistency really made sense to me. Excellent. Thanks, Isabella. Yeah, it relates to me in tennis. Excellent. Yeah, couldn't agree more. It's not just consistency tactically, it's consistency in everything you do as well. So thanks for sharing that. I think all of those 5 strategies, and especially the one thing I wanted you to really, hopefully you heard in those 5 strategies, is the 5 senses. You know, the senses are what can really trigger people to either have positive patterns or, you know, non-resourceful patterns. All right, so we'll keep moving along. So so now obviously remember, this is always section 3. So this is where we go over the how. How do you implement those core strategies? And we always tend to give 3 tactics. So the first tactic, okay, is about auditing one pattern. And the way that you audit a pattern is you have a look at what you do in the morning and the evening, because there's no doubt with athletes, what they do when they first get up and right before they go to bed can completely change the shape of how you play, how you perform, how you turn up in life. So that's really, really critical. And just having a look at what, you know, deep down, what do you do when you first get out of bed, and is it serving you? And what do you do right before you go to bed, and is it serving you? So just again, just have a think what you do, like what you consistently do, and just sort of say to yourself, you know, it's not for anyone else's knowledge, just for you to go, hey, that's a pattern that I want to change, because I know that it's affecting my performance, or it's affecting my mood, or it's affecting how I approach my day. So definitely that's how, you know, just have an honest, you know, when do you actually, like, and especially use your journal here as well, but when do you actually just stop? It's a bit like last week. When do you actually stop and reflect on, what do I do in the morning? What do I do in the evening? And is it serving me? So I know for me, I've had to do a lot of changes around that. I definitely don't have the mobile phone in the bedroom. The first thing I do is I have my journal, my gratitude journal, and boom, with a cup of tea. That's, you know, just sharing openly and honestly. That's the first thing I do in the morning. Okay, so that's tactic number 1. Tactic number 2 is triggers. So what I want you to do, and this is really critical if you want to make a change. So let's reflect on either a morning or an evening pattern that's not serving you. And I want you to have a think about what the trigger is. Is it, remember, it'll be something that either somebody's said something that triggers you. It can be where visual is a huge one. So what I want to say around the mobile phones is this whole concept of notifications. It is huge. When people see a notification on their phone, they basically can't help themselves. So just even sharing my phone there, I've got 8 notifications there. And so all of a sudden you want to click on it. One of the best things that you can do immediately, just as a quick tactical tip, is put all your social media in one sort of folder. So if you've got Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Snapchat is SnapTalk. There you go. That's a new one. I think I just invented one, Conrad. That's too funny. So you just put them all in a folder. And if you can group that, what happens is your notifications will be so minuscule, they won't, you'll be able to set a boundary around that. So it's a great little tip to put everything in folders. And then of course you can go into settings and you can adjust your notifications. But what happens, just remember, the minute you see it, you're triggered. So it's visual. So it's a visual trigger. So instead of seeing that, adjust the visual trigger. Maybe the first thing you see on your phone is a motivational quote. Maybe the first thing that you place the phone somewhere where this isn't the alarm clock. Go back to old school, get an old school alarm clock, or get a phone that's on airplane mode, an old phone, and use that as an alarm. So that's tactic number 2. And then I'll share the third one, and then again, we'll just stop for any questions. So this is about, oh, sorry, let me just go back 2 seconds. I just wanted to speak about the car, maybe just for the parents and coaches on the line. One of the biggest things, even maybe it's a bit more lax here in America, but I know when I used to drive, the first thing I would do, I'd look in the side mirror, and if there was no cars coming, I would pull out into the traffic, and then I would put my seatbelt on. I know American seatbelts are a bit automatic, but amazing. The police in Australia, they are red hot, and I got a number of tickets, because of this habit, which of course is dangerous, which of course is not good for, Conrad's laughing because he knows we're going to get 12 points on our license. One thing I had to do, so what happens, the trigger was the visual looking in the mirror. So I had to replace the visual with touching my shoulder. So first thing before I looked in the rear vision mirror was I had to touch my shoulder to remind myself to grab the belt, to put it on, and then look in the mirror. Because what am I saving myself? Like 1 second. So there's an example. Maybe some of the adults can have a laugh at one of my patterns that I was able to replace. Remember, it was a visual trigger. So make sure you know, is it a feeling? Is it something you feel? Is it something you smell? Is it something you taste? Maybe when you eat your breakfast, it just triggers all sorts of negative feelings about certain things, whatever you eat for breakfast before you compete. And then finally,
Em, I wondered just if I could share one thing. I took one of your tips this week. I've been trying to get out early in the morning and do an hour on the bike. And a couple of days, probably a week ago, I went out on the bike and I failed to turn my phone onto flight mode. And my phone was just bing, 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 bing. And by about the third or fourth mile, I had to stop and look. I had to. I didn't want to, but I had to. So I did. And then I got distracted. And then I had to get off the bike. And then I had to make some. And the next thing I knew, I'd forgotten I was on a bike ride. I was back in a virtual office. So today I went out and did it. And I actually just turned my phone off. I listened to some music. When I got back, I'd totally forgotten about it. An hour later, I turned it on and I had 47 notifications. So I realized this is just essential for me to give that time to myself. So again, I wonder if a lot of the kids are aware how many messages they get in a day and how many times that distracts them.
Yeah. And it is interesting, even the apps that record how much, you're on your phone as well. And being able to even just set a goal around that is a good thing. Another thing, obviously, is the boundaries of exactly what you just said, airplane mode. Like when you're practicing and if you're really ingrained in a practice, then, it's what it is. It's not just notifications, it's the vibration of the phone. Because everyone these days puts it on silent. So they think, my phone's not on. But when it vibrates in your pocket, you can't help but look at it. As you said, you had to look at it. The world didn't end, but it was a force of nature, right? And that's a pattern that when you're practicing, how can you be present? How can you give all your energy to that match or that opponent or that learning opportunity when you are not absorbed? If you want to take a break, a 10-minute break in the middle of your practice and check your phone, if you have to do that, then potentially, but as long as you don't do it right before you go back on court, because you'll be thinking about, you need to reply to a message, or you've got to get, a lot of people say, I have to get back to this person. Well, you don't. They'll be okay. And if you really want to prioritize, being the best athlete that you can, then this is really important. And one thing we did with the Junior Fed Cup team is we had no mobile phones, for breakfast, lunch and dinner, which meant you couldn't even have it on the table, because a lot of people go to dinner with it on the table. And then of course, again, it vibrates. And then the next thing you know, that's under the table and they're doing this one. So what we weren't allowed to even put them on the table and have them. And I definitely took them overnight. That was, and no wonder we ended up, saving a couple of match points and winning Asia Oceania 2018, because these little things that count, they add up. And finally, the third tactic is the anchor. So again, we're talking about little things that you can use. Just a squidge ball is an anchor. A necklace is an anchor. A ring, maybe you've already got anchors that you use, but whatever your anchor is, it needs to be specific, because what you need to do is when you feel that trigger coming on, you need to fire off that anchor so that then you're consciously aware of what you need to do. So if it is this constant habit of checking your phone, and then your anchor, instead of going to that phone, is to turn off notifications, turn off vibration, and instead it is maybe just, you know, touching your hat with your index finger and your thumb. My anchor is always my thumb, my index finger, and my middle finger. I always put those. That's always my anchor before I do when I want to get myself in state, and then I can choose what behaviour I want, what habit that I want to replace. So that's an example. So hopefully that made sense. So let me just pause there before we're about to get into the game plan. Any questions on any of the tactics on how we implement these new patterns? Auditing any patterns? Anyone got anyone not sure? Anyone want to ask anything?
Emma, I'll ask you one quick question if I might. Triggers, very obviously very important, and you know, everyone's got to rehearse them. But should they come from within, or should they come from someone who's with you, or an observer, a coach, parent?
So remember, a trigger can come from anywhere, and it can be something or someone. So a trigger is actually, when you're auditing a negative pattern, a trigger is something that you need to identify what that trigger is. What sets you off down in the spiral where you're losing productivity, where you know, so for you, the trigger was the fact that your phone, you didn't put it on silent, or you didn't turn off the vibe. So that's the trigger. Yeah. So there, to replace that with an anchor in that situation, for you to become consciously aware before you ride your bike, maybe when you put your hands on the handlebars of the bike, then what you would do is then you would make sure when the hands go on the handlebars, you turn off the phone onto airplane mode. Done. Perfect. And then when your hands come off the bike, remember to put it back on, so then you're not losing, you know, then you haven't got, maybe you're not 47 messages behind, you're only 20.
Yeah. Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Love it. Yeah, absolutely.
But you know, this is one thing I do a lot of work with, helping people try and identify, because there is a pattern and a consistency. So always look at, you know, even the obviously best case scenario is have a think of when you've played your best match, you know, or your best field hockey match, or your best lacrosse match, and when you haven't played well, and look at what you did exactly the night before, what you ate for breakfast, and what you do right before the game, and look at what the difference is. And somewhere there'll be a trigger. Does that make sense around triggers?
Absolutely. Thank you. That was perfect.
Yeah. All right. So the game plan for this week, and for everyone who's with us on week 2. All right. So for 15 points this week, you have to write down a new pattern that you want. So obviously you've got to identify one that's not serving you, and then think about, are you motivated? Like, what is it that you actually want? What's one thing that you can change? Maybe it's adding the breathing into your routine. Maybe that 1 minute breathing exercise a day would be a great new pattern that you want to add in. So you'll be looking at all sorts of things. When do you want to do it? In the morning, in the evening, in the middle of the day? Find a new pattern, and potentially, you know, that replaces something, an old pattern, something that you want, something you're motivated towards. Okay, that's 15 points. Now the 30 points is for you to go through the process of looking at that old pattern, and you identify the trigger, and you need to replace that with an anchor. Okay, so that's how you get 30 points. So remember, just use your journal, use your diary to say, right, what is it that I do? What's causing me this behavior? And then what am I going to choose to replace it? You have to choose an anchor. The anchor doesn't have to be there long term, but the anchor has to be there to remind you. Otherwise you won't even know that it's happening. And then, of course, 40 points. You've just got to commit to the new pattern for 3 days, right? And, not just or, 21 days. So for example, if you want to do something, if you've got a pattern that's really not serving you well, maybe it's your food choices, then do a 3-day like intensive. For parents and coaches on the line, I highly recommend TFD for 3 days, technology-free days. Go on holidays. Someone said they're going on a mini vacation. Go TFD just for 3 days and then turn your phone back on. You'd be amazed. Obviously, also maybe adults, we've got alcohol-free days, caffeine-free days, just for 3 days. Just give it a go, see what happens. Connect with nature, connect with yourself, connect with exercise. Maybe it's an exercise new habit, or maybe it's a training habit. Maybe for some of the younger athletes, maybe you're going to start packing your own bag and not having your parents do it. Maybe you want to commit to that for 21 days. So, 21 days, you could do something 3 times a week. Doesn't need to be every single day. But definitely if you want to take an old pattern and create a routine, then that's what you have to do to make change. And if you do that, then obviously you're more likely to win the game. So on that note, what do we celebrate? We celebrate your presence. We celebrate you being here. You are here live on this call. And we're celebrating the fact that, it's actually 50 minutes of our life that we'll all never get back. Okay. So how cool is that? Right? Let's celebrate that you've dedicated the time and you've invested in yourself. What's next? Next week, we've got module 3. Same time, same place, and it is about empowering language. One of my all-time favorite topics, strengthening your inner voice, how to use direct reframing. We're going to go indirect questioning, and we're going to go the truth about why questions next week, so you can choose to play above the line. Remember that the ball's in your court. I'm going to try and get my ball on my screen today. Oh, no, missed it. Almost. And then I love this photo that I received this morning from the Girl Power camp that we ran at Centercourt last year. So we've got open Q&A now. We've got about 9 minutes or so of open Q&A. And the first thing I'm going to ask you to do in the chat box, who can remember, and check everyone's listening, what was strategy number 3? First person in the chat box. Let's see who we've got in the chat box. Oh, Hanan from Kuwait. She may have, I'm not sure if she heard, I gave her a big shout out earlier with regards to your testimonial this morning. So thank you for, I know it's past midnight in Kuwait, but that's what Centercourt 360 has created. Thank you, Isabella. Remember, there's an order to it, and that order is really, really important. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And now I can see everyone's smiles, and love it, everyone who's taken the time to be online. So I am going to look in the chat box here. So this is just open Q&A now to win the game set match of your life. Anything to do with patterns, or if anyone's feeling brave, feel free to tell me one of your patterns and I can help find your trigger and replace it with an anchor, or Conrad, feel free to jump in with a question. Oh, we think we've got one. Do you want to read out that question?
Yes, no problem. From Jing Wen. Can you explain how to understand the diagram at the very beginning of the presentation?
Sure, would love to. So why don't I wonder if so we're talking about the genius model. So what I'll do is, let me just open this up. And if I just go to this one and I go from current slide, I'm just going to go backwards. That's just easier and quicker. All right. So there's my Hanan, there's your testimonial. Thank you for sharing. Okay. So the genius model, the way it was designed was based on the 3 biggest areas that I see that athletes and a lot of humans, not just athletes, but what they struggle with. And remember, these are related to the top 5 things that all champions have in common. So this one here is purpose. So that's number 3 of the top 5 qualities that all champions have in common. And it's the one thing that people struggle with. The minute that they get connected to their purpose, the minute amazing things transform in their training. The minute they understand why they're doing a drill, amazing things transform in their training. So that's the core module of purpose. And these are that's the core component. And these are the modules around the outside. Confidence. Remember, the second quality that all champions have in common is belief. Okay. And you can only get belief layer by layer, which then equals confidence. So this is the core component of confidence. And these are the 3 modules. And today we did module 2, which is patterns. And the final component that all champions have in common, the 5th quality, is team. So an awareness of their team. And you can't have a team, even in an individual sport. There's the coach, the parent, the fitness coach, the psych. There's all different people within a team. And then obviously lacrosse and field hockey, you've got all the different members. And that's all about relationships. If you can't manage relationships within a team, then it's the fastest way to go backwards. And so these are the 3 core modules that built in the relationship. So week 3 of the Empowerment Project is language. Okay, week 4 is values, week 5 is self-esteem, week 6 is reframing, week 7 is direction, week 8 is courage, and week 9 is communication. So so it's one module from each of the core components that leaves you feeling empowered. That's why it's called the Empowerment Project. How did I go with that explanation?
Spot on. Loved it.
Hope that one was to your liking. All right. Any other questions? Beautiful. You're welcome. Very helpful. Love it. Does anyone want?
If I can ask a question, my question would be, we all know, we have the inner voice and we have the inside little birdie that talks to us. We all know when we're probably doing something that's harmful to our end goal. What would be the first step, in your opinion, to, we can have a different mindset, but to actually action that and form that actual pattern and that habit? What would be the first thing you do? For example, it might be, if you got up an hour earlier, you'd just get that much more quality out of your day. You're saying it's got to be 3 days that you do that, and then 21 days in a row should make that change. Is there any other advice? Could some diarizing help? Could some alerting someone else of your goals so that you're more accountable? Yeah. Is there anything like that could assist?
Yeah, definitely. So all of those things that you mentioned, remember it starts with self-awareness. So that's a huge part of what we're doing next week. I love how you always promote next week's webinar, Conrad. Excellent. But a huge part is actually becoming aware of what it is the voice is saying. So, for example, it's so comfy in bed, it's cold outside, I don't want to get up, I'm so tired, I feel, my body's so heavy. And notice all those words like heavy, tired, etc. That then imagine if you could flip those things and fix your pattern usually the night before. Normally you're tired because maybe you've stayed up 2 hours longer than you normally do. Have a look at what you're doing the night before. Make yourself accountable via these gamification strategies, 15, 30, 40 game. Tell someone what you're going to do. Be accountable to that and say, hey, for 15 points, I'm going to do 3 days and I'm not going to have any carbs. Or for example, just to, I'm not saying if you're an athlete, obviously carbs are very important. But if you wanted to, just sort of isolate sugar, for example, for 3 days, there's so many things that you can do just to catapult that with regards to gaming. Like give yourself a little, and what do we do every week? We celebrate, like, give yourself a 3-day challenge and then celebrate it, not as if, say you're not going to do something and then 3 days later, then you go on a sugar binge, but celebrate by rewarding yourself with something. And it can only become part of your conscious awareness when you write it down, when you journal it, when you write down, hey, here's my old pattern. Remember, it's a non-judgmental snapshot to really look at your, the patterns that don't serve you. It's no judgment, but then once you've written it down, go, do you want to change that? And if you do, then find that motivation towards pleasure. That's what I mean by celebrate. you know, find, because motivating yourself away from pain is a good short-term solution. You know, because I don't want to be behind on my emails, so I'm going to get up. But imagine if there's something much higher that connected to getting up an hour earlier that allows you to be more free, to have more time with your kids, for example, you know, and obviously with athletes, you know, that's why I never ever use fitness as a punishment. Like, I mean, mate, that's so old school. Like, you know, to me, you saw in the Girl Power camp, if you get the balls up in under a minute, you get rewarded with a 1-court suicide because it's going to make you tougher to beat. You're going to be fitter, and it's only 17 seconds, so it's not too much lactic acid in the body anyway. So, so you know, I think that's really important. So, cool. Are there any other questions? We've got about 60 seconds, really, don't we? Anyone else feeling like the urge to? Well, let's just type in the chat box then. Who's going to commit? So take action, balls in your court. I want to see it in the chat box. What are you going to do? 15, 30, 40 game. Are you going to get a new anchor? Are you going to identify your trigger? Are you going to write down an old pattern? Are you, what are you going to do? Write it in the chat box. I want to see what are you going to take action on? Let's have a look what we've got here. Just to round things up, what's something you want to make a change around? Perhaps it's just re-gripping your rackets or re-gripping your hockey stick. Excellent. You're going to address your patterns. Yeah, just remember, audit. That's 15 points. Just look at the ones that are not serving you. Thank you, Ali. All right. Yeah, awesome, Conrad. You're accountable to me, buddy.
I know.
You are accountable to me.
Believe me, I know.
All right. So I love it. So, and doing it in the first thing of the day, I mean, then you don't have to worry about it. Otherwise you'll never, often when we leave things later in the day, we never find the time.
Right.
One more thing on that as well, maybe my last little tip, and this is an awesome piece of advice that one of my mentors gave me, especially around something that you don't necessarily want, like it's not natural for you to want to do something, is to put it in your diary like an appointment. Okay, so maybe it's like for athletes listening, maybe it's stretching. I know sometimes stretching or rolling or those types of things can be quite tedious, boring. But if you put it in your diary like it's an appointment, and then ask yourself, would you cancel an appointment on someone else? Generally not. You never cancel on someone else, but do you cancel on yourself? I could push that back. I'll push my stretching back. I'll push it back. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it on the weekend. And then all of a sudden you've lost the week. So put it in your diary, make an appointment with yourself. So I love it. And remember, if you attend week 3, that's 3 weeks in a row, and you do the game plan, Conrad and I are going to find something in the Centercourt bag of tricks to reward you with. Absolutely no doubt about that. And hopefully we can continue with the whole empowerment project, Conrad. But Thank you, everybody. I'm really super grateful for everyone's time. Committing to the pattern. Good. Waking up an hour earlier. Nice. And next time, just remember, rather than tend to fall off the wagon, remember that's what we're going to be covering next week. How would you reframe that sentence instead of I tend to fall off the wagon? So we'll be looking at how we reframe a sentence like that to saying something along the lines of I choose to take my time back. So it's the same sort of empowering statement. So I'm just going to type in thank you to everyone. And Centercourt 360. That's us signing off. And hope everyone had a really wonderful investment of their life. Remember, time we're never going to get back. And enjoy your patterns. And thank you to my good mate Conrad. And I appreciate your insights. And Marley, thank you again for checking in from Atlanta. And please spread the word. I know Conrad gave you a challenge last time of inviting someone on your team. Please keep channeling and spreading the word, and also let Conrad know what's your best time for the next block of 3. We may experiment with a different time, a different day. But great webinar today. Thank you very much, Jim. We appreciate you being here, and we hope everyone can make it for next week.
So Emma, thank you on behalf of everyone else, and obviously Centercourt 360. You're a champion. You're a motivator. You're the best. I really appreciate what you're doing for us, and my gratitude goes out to you. So can't wait till next week. Got a lot of work to do between now and then, and I'm excited by it. So
thanks for everyone staying on for the whole hour as well. I really appreciate it. Hardly anyone dropped out, so we're loving that. We're loving that. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Thanks, Ali.
Thank you, Em.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Isabella. Appreciate you. Thanks, Ali. Take care, everybody.